The reason that I call some of the instruments that we brought out today endangered African American musical instruments is because if you go into the school systems throughout this country, very few people are teaching the children about the true origins of the music that you hear in this country, particularly jazz, R&B. They're not teaching them and showing them the truth as to where this music and how this music came about. Over here I have a jug. This particular jug is from Mississippi. It's early 1900s, it's ceramic. And if you go into certain parts of the Congo, Zaire, to Central Africa, you'll find that there are instruments there. There's one called mfungi. There's a similar instrument in Cuba, which Africans, enslaved Africans, preserved a form of that same type of musical instrument, and music played on it is still in existence in Cuba today. This, because we were forced in this country to do away with many of our cultural expressions, primarily our religious views. We were not allowed to name our children according to our traditions. We were not allowed to play many of our traditional indigenous musical instruments. Some of the reasons being because, especially with the drum, I'm sure many of you know that the drum was banned in many parts of the United States. I think probably one of the only places in this country where the drum was allowed to be beaten or played was here in New Orleans in Congo Square on Sundays. And that was while the French were here. But the British, throughout the rest of the country, if you were caught drumming, they would kill you. They would hang you because the drums were seen as a voice of freedom. The drums, as you know, most of the Africans who were stolen from Africa were taken from West Africa, Central Africa, some from Angola and Mozambique. Many of the languages spoken in those countries are tonal, and they could use and still use these instruments to speak on, to communicate on, not as a Morse code, but were able and still are able to communicate entire languages, proverbs, riddles, histories, epics on their musical instruments. So therefore, the colonial masters, being aware of this, had to ban the drum because it was a primary source of communication. They could not speak the indigenous languages of the people they had stolen from Africa, therefore they had to ban their telephone or their internet, the drum, and a lot of the other instruments associated with it. Of course, African people are geniuses, and they found many ways to hide or to camouflage various forms of musical expression, various forms of musical instruments. And the jug is one of those instruments that in Africa, there are ceramic horns. There are also horns. Afterwards, you're all invited to come up if you like. I have an elephant tusk horn from the Akan people who are located in Ghana, and some also in Cote d'Ivoire. It's called Abin by the Asante people. It's an ivory horn. It's played in the courts of kings and queens. It's used to recite proverbs on, riddles on. It's used to teach people, to remind people of past epics and histories. And right next to it is another horn. This is the Abin from Ghana. This is the Abin from Jamaica, West Indies. And if you go to Jamaica today, up to a town called Achampong, which is a corruption of the Akan name Achampong. Achampong was the brother of Kojo. Kojo was one of the primary revolutionary leaders of the Maroons in Jamaica. And they gave the British hell. And this was one of their tools that their traditional guerrilla army used to fight a guerrilla war against the British. They used the Abin to speak to each other when they were up in the mountains, when they were up in the bush, before they would go down to raid a plantation to try to free other Africans. They used this instrument. Every January the 6th in Jamaica, up till today, you will find Maroon, descendants, African descendants in Jamaica in a compound still blowing this horn. And they have a festival there every January 6th that is devoted to the worship of their ancestors. In particular, one lady by the name of Nanny. The British call her Nanny, but her real name is Nana, because a large percentage of the people taken into Jamaica were taken out of Ghana. And Kojo was another leader, which means male born on a Monday. And this is up in the Akompong region, up in the Chilani area of Jamaica, where you can find this horn, the Aben. If you go to Ghana, you also find the Aben. But when we were stolen and taken to the Americas, we could not, or we were not allowed to make some of these instruments. So we found other ways. The Moonshine Joke. This is a traditional, for those of you who don't know, this is what in America people used to, and I think in some parts of the South, they might still put white lightning or moonshine, which is like traditional rum, or corn liquor inside of. But if you blow into it, you get music. And from 1895 to 1930, you had what was called jug bands, and you also had washtub bands. An example of the washtub is center stage, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And the jug bands and the washboard bands were very, very important because people like King Oliver and Louis Armstrong, that's where they started. They called those spasm bands back then. And a lot of times they would use the jug as the bass instrument in the orchestra, or they would use what we call this instrument in African American tradition is the one-string jitterbug. Let me hear everybody say that.
One-string jitterbug.
Okay, that's the one-string jitterbug. And you know there also was a dance way back called the jitterbug. Now the washtub, or the one-string jitterbug, some people call it a one-string, but there's different types of one-string instruments here in America, is a very, very, very important instrument to the world. And I will tell you why. In Africa, you have various forms. According to where you go in Africa, there's so many thousands of languages and dialects. You have what we would call here, or what some ethnomusicologists would call earth bows, which is a hole dug, covered with bark or with the leather of an animal, skin of an animal, with a string coming up out of the ground to a bowed branch. And this could be plucked or played. Howard Cortlander, who wrote a great work a long time ago called The Drum and the Hoe, has some real good pictures and some descriptions of the earth bow. And this instrument was created, it was to camouflage the earth bow, because we're banned in this country from playing traditional African instruments. So the Africans took the wash tub, that's a tub that we use to wash our clothes in, a broomstick, and the cord of a rope, natural fiber rope. In the older days, according to some historians, they would use the gut of a cow, which could be rolled up very easily. And you find that the tradition of playing the one-string jitterbug grew into the double bass tradition of jazz music today, or the upright in jazz music today. And of course, out of jazz and out of blues, also, we got R&B, disco music, and hip-hop. A lot of that has come out of this tradition of playing this particular instrument right there. I'll demonstrate the sound in a little bit. This is an instrument that you could find. It's pretty cross-cultural, especially in West Africa.